With that said, next up is going to be Dr. Greg Munshaw. Uh, Dr. Munshaw is, a grass seed like whiz kid. He went and got his PhD at Virginia Tech. He worked as a professor at the University of Mississippi and Kentucky, and now he's transitioned over to Mountain View Seeds. But before he got to Mountain View, and while he was there, he started to work with something called the A-list turfgrass seeds. And basically, the A-list is taking a look at all the grass varieties that are grown out there and finding out which varieties are most sustainable. And so today's topic is going to be talking about A-list seeds. And remember, I told you there's been game changers for me, things that have made me get excited. And so A-list is one of those things that got me really excited because it allowed me again to have something that's quantitative that said, okay, if I'm picking out grass seed, which is going to be the one that's going to work the best for me? Which one is going to be the one that's going to do the best job for what I'm trying to do? And so without further ado, Dr. Munshaw, welcome. Dr. Munshaw, I need to unmute your microphone. I apologize. How about now?
How about now? Yeah, I was clicking on the button. I was like, I don't think this is working quite right, but it's great to be with you guys. And, I was just listening into what you were saying at the end of Carl's talk there, and I completely 100% agree with you that pesticides, although necessary in some circumstances, I think we're at a point where there's a perception issue that we've got in the turf industry. And every time somebody that's not in the industry sees us doing something that they don't approve of, we are doing something wrong for them, wrong for the environment. And so anything that we can do to change that perception, I think is moving in the right direction. And I think A-list is on top of that to try and change that completely. And so, yeah, I'll be talking a little bit about A-list today and about some other things, just some improved variety information that I've got. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see if I can figure this out. I'm looking at a huge picture of myself and not my slides. So, okay. So I want to start this with, I'm not a tree hugger by any sense of the imagination. I am a Canadian native, and I, usually hear people talking about Canadians as being a little bit more environmentally focused than their American counterparts. But I don't look at it that way. I think there's a time and a place for chemicals. But like I said, the perception issue is a big one. And if we can change those perceptions, I think we're going to get ahead of a lot of people here and maybe get them going from griping about what we're doing to maybe switching some things up to, maybe these guys aren't so bad after all. Maybe there are some good things that are going on in the turf industry. So specifically, I'll be talking to you about reducing some of our chemical and fertilizer and water inputs by using some newer grass varieties. All right, there we go. Too far. Okay, so think about this. If you could design the perfect grass by mixing anything and everything together, what would it have? So let me preface this by pre-pandemic, man, I'll tell you what, I was happy to do some webinars and not have to do driving. I just switched over to Mountain View Seeds in May of last year. Before that, I was the extension specialist at the University of Kentucky and was asked to give presentations all the time, and I'd have to drive to them. And so whenever I could give webinars, I was like, man, this is great. Now I'm like, oh, get me in front of an audience. I'm sick to death of sitting behind a computer screen. You just don't get the interaction. And so, this slide, I'd like to hear what is your dream grass, but I understand with 380 computer screens, really hard to do. So thinking about that, for my perfect grass, I would probably want something that's drought tolerant, disease resistant, dense to fend off weeds. I would want dark green color. I would want traffic tolerance. I would want recuperability, so stolons and rhizomes, one or the other or both. There's a whole bunch of aspects that we can throw together into one grass that would make it the perfect grass. So the question is there one perfect grass? And so maybe I'd argue to say the closest we can come to that maybe is Bermuda grass, which a lot of people are just going to think it's a weed, but man, I'll tell you what, it has a lot of the things that we like to see about a turf grass. It recovers, it has little issues with diseases and weeds, and it's drought tolerant, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in your area of the world, that's not going to work. And so the superpowers that you have to work with may be limited, but hopefully will improve over time. And I'll hope to show you some of that today. So if anybody's been paying any attention whatsoever, the internet is absolutely full of lawn information. People that are completely against chemicals on lawns. Like this top left ad here, we're not raising grass, we're raising families. I just threw up a little bit in my mouth. That is Montgomery County, Maryland. If you've heard anything about Montgomery County, Maryland, they're crazy with their pesticide bans. Good friend of mine is a sports turf manager in Montgomery County, and it just drives him up the wall because he's not allowed to use things that every one of the rest of us gets to use to manage simple problems. But there's more and more and more of this coming along, and I'm not clairvoyant. I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you that the future is less chemicals. And so that's just the way it is. And so we've got to get ahead of this. We've got to get things in place where we can use less chemicals, less things that people think that are bad for the environment. Again, whether they are or not, it doesn't matter. It's perception, and perception is reality for most people these days. So reduced inputs is a critical thing moving forward. All right, so why does this matter? It absolutely matters for a lot of reasons. Again, the perception thing, people think we're bad because we're spraying chemicals or watering grass or whatever we're doing. But, I like to think about right plant, right place. Are we growing the right grass in the right place? Is whatever's on your lawn or whatever's on your roughs of your golf course or whatever, is it the best grass for that situation? And so sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you've got an older variety on there that maybe has been eclipsed completely with newer varieties, and some of the things that your older grass can't do, the new grasses can do. So I like to think about Papa John's ads. I'm not a Papa John's fan in the slightest. As a matter of fact, their pizza makes me nauseous, but their ad is, sorry, if you're a franchisee, I apologize. Better ingredients, better pizza, right? So that's what they're slinging. Better pizza, better ingredients, better pizza. Think about grass. If you've got better ingredients going into the turf, so better seeds, you're going to have better turf. It makes complete sense, right? So, the thing is, how do we know what's good seed, what's bad seed? The bad thing is there's so much marketing out there, and you've got to get around the marketing. That the only place that you can figure that out is by going to independent sites. Don't listen to me. So my job with Mountain View is not sales. I don't have any sales whatsoever. I am doing research and extension type activities. My job is to educate. And my boss has told me, if there's a better grass than ours, by gosh, tell people there's a better grass than ours, which I completely appreciate, and one of the reasons why I joined this company. But there's so much marketing out there. Don't just fall for the marketing. Go to the source of the data from the universities. So our species and cultivar selections is really important because it's going to dictate how good the grass is going to look throughout the entire year. So you might have grass that looks good in spring or fall, but how's it going to do in the summertime? The bottom left picture there is northern Indiana. We've got a Kentucky bluegrass lawn that's struggling with the heat and humidity. Not the hottest place in the world, but they get pretty warm in northern Indiana. And then around the curb there, obviously the city came in and put in a new curb and sodded in tall fescue. And so we've got one grass that's surviving and looking great, and one grass that's shutting down and miserable. They've obviously got weeds in that Kentucky bluegrass lawn too, but big differences between those lawns. So seasonal inputs there, you've got differences. You've got one grass that's screaming for water while the other grass that's just doing absolutely fine.
So earlier on, Dr. Muncho, you asked what was my holy grail of grass varieties, and it was tall fescue.
It's tall fescue.
Oh my gosh, tall fescue. I teach a class, and every time I say the word tall fescue, I make all the students scream back and holler, hallelujah and amen. That's how excited I am about tall fescue.
Well, so how about this? I was in Kentucky for 8.5 years. And what's Kentucky's nickname?
Bluegrass state.
The bluegrass state, which is a bunch of hogwash. Bluegrass does horribly in Kentucky. And I petitioned the governor to change it to the tall fescue state, but they weren't having it.
They were not receptive?
They were not receptive, yeah. So, but yeah, Kentucky bluegrass has its time and place, and we'll talk about it, but it's compared to tall fescue, man, it doesn't hold a candle. So when you're choosing a grass, some things to think about for sure. How is the grass going to be used? Is it an athletic field? Is it just a completely aesthetic lawn that you just gets looked at? Is it a high traffic lawn? Is it a golf rough, golf fairway? You know, there's a whole bunch of things that grass can be used for. What's yours going to be used for? And so that's going to help dictate which grass you should use. Strengths and weaknesses of every grass. How much shade? Again, that's going to take out grasses like Kentucky bluegrass. Doesn't grow well in shade. So you got to think about that. How hard do you want to work and how much do you plan to invest? So, you know, I think back to my senior year of college when I was taking a turf class, and I remember writing on an exam that the question was, if you could choose any grass for this situation in the transition zone, which grass would you choose and why? Defend your answer. And I said Kentucky bluegrass. And I said, I understand Kentucky bluegrass is not a good fit for the transition zone, but I think it's the prettiest grass. And you can spray fungicides and this and that and the other to make that grass prettier and to make it survive in those situations. So if it was a class that I was teaching now, I remember I got full marks for it. If it was a class that I was teaching, I would have marked that wrong, because you cannot just take a grass that is not adapted for a situation, dump more inputs into it and say, okay, I'm keeping this grass looking great because I'm doing way more work to it. So I don't think that's a good reason to choose a grass. Oh, I like it. It did well in my house in Minnesota or North Dakota, so I'm going to grow it here in the transition zone. No, it doesn't work like that. It's not a good reason to be growing it. So again, better ingredients, better pizza. How do we figure that stuff out? So I'm sure 99% of you have heard of NTEP before. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on NTEP this morning because NTEP is very important to what we do. NTEP is the first step in figuring out which grasses should be grown in different locations around the country. And it's a completely blind test where, and it's also at just universities, and so the seed companies aren't involved other than paying for it and giving seed, and so you're getting truly unbiased results from this. It's not perfect, but it's the best thing that we've got currently to figure out these which grasses will fit in different locations. So a little bit about it really quickly. So when a guy like me is out rating turf grass quality on an NTEP trial, so we're looking at 4 different things typically for turf quality: density, uniformity, texture, and color. We want high density, high uniformity, fine texture, dark green color. And the better the grass looks, we're going to give it a score closest to 9. So if it's perfect, it's 9. If it's so-so, it may be a 6. If it's dead, it's a 1. So those are what those numbers are when you look at them on NTEP. 1 is horrible, 9 is perfect.
Is this just visual, or do you guys actually have tools to look at color and density and all that?
Say that again.
Is this a visual that you look at it and come up with a number, or you have a tool?
Yeah. So for decades, that's exactly how it was. We would look at the grass and we were trained on this too. It was something that I remember when I was in graduate school in the 90s. I went to a NTEP training class that Kevin put on, Kevin Morris, and trained us how to go through and rate plots. And so it was a visual thing where you'd over time build your consistency. But the problem with it is my ratings in Kentucky, so my scores that you would see on the NTEP trials from Kentucky are not going to be the same as the ones from New Jersey or Virginia or wherever, because it's not the same person doing them. And so because of that, and this is why this is such a good question, Doug Karcher at the University of Arkansas has developed software that you can take digital images of grass and it will give you things like uniformity, density, and color. And so it will formulate a turf grass quality score for you based on the pixels of different colors that it's picking up from the canopy. And so it's taken the guesswork out of it, or the inconsistencies out of it. There's still some tweaking of it still going on. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting better and better. And that's the future of this. It's not going to just be me walking through a field writing numbers down. And there's still a lot of that going on, and it's still acceptable. But excuse me, the future is not that. It's going to be all digital. All right, so if you pull up NTEP and you go to data and click on tall fescue, and you click on the 2012 test, this is what you're going to see. And I chose the 2012 test because it's the last test that is completed. It was finished in 2017. There's another one going on right now, but it's obviously it's ongoing. So the things on the left there are the things that you're going to see: locations across the country, turf grass quality, color, texture, et cetera, et cetera. Again, with our turf quality, it's our beauty contest. It's looking at the grass and saying, okay, I like the look of this one better than this one, so I'm going to give it a higher score. And that's really all it is. It's a beauty contest. But if you think about it, if a grass is under stress, or if a grass is not adapted to a location, how beautiful is it going to be? It's going to be pretty rough. And so it's not going to score very well. So these beauty contest scores are still pretty important, even though they're not be all end all scores. There's other things to look at other than turf grass quality. So this is what I look at when I'm out there. So these are just kind of to give you an idea of what I'm seeing, how I'm rating these things. So that top left there, maybe a 3 or a 4 score. Bottom left, maybe a 5 or 6. And the top right there, maybe a 6 or 7. And when you're looking at 100 and some different tall fescues times 3 reps, so 300 and some tall fescues that they all look very similar, it's really hard. You're looking for anything that's different. You know, you're actually excited to come up on that Kentucky 31 plot that looks completely different, because at least you can give a different number. But these are the kind of things that we're looking at for color-wise and density and that sort of thing. All right, so if you click on turf grass quality, this is what comes up. You've got a bunch of useless stuff on here and some things that are going to be helpful. The top 3 things there: the quality for LPI Group 1, quality for LPI Group 2, and Group 3. That location performance index to me is useless. It just started a few years ago. I don't like it whatsoever. They've done some math to group locations together and change scores slightly. I don't like it at all. I like, just give me the state and let me know how that grass does in whatever state or across all states. So what I like to go down to is look at the maintained schedule, Schedule A or Schedule B. So Schedule A is high input, Schedule B is lower input. It's not no input, it's lower input. And so that's the one I usually like to look at for lawns. So if I click on those, I'm going to get every state that had these tests, and I'll have scores for every grass that's in that trial. You can also look at other things here. If we look at your specific region for the Northeast, this is what you'll get if you click on the Northeast. So you get 2 pages, you scroll down to the bottom, and you've got this thing called the LSD value. It's the least significant difference. So I'm not going to get into a statistics lesson with you today, but this is really important to understand what these tables mean when you look at them? How do you tell if one grass is better than a different grass on there? So the most important thing here is to look at this LSD value, and you go all over. This is the mean of the 4 different states in the Northeast there, Connecticut, 2 New Jersey locations in Pennsylvania, and the mean of those 4 states. That mean for the LSD is 0.5. So that's the number that we care about. All right, so our least significant difference is 0.5. Our lowest score here is Kentucky 31, which has a 1.8. If we add 0.5 to 1.8, it gives us 2.3. And so if there's another grass within 0.5 of Kentucky 31, they are exactly the same. So is that BAR-FA experimental from Behrenbruch, is it better than Kentucky 31 statistically? Yes, it is, because it's more than 0.5 away from it. So looking at that one then, that experimental, is it worse than Warhawk? So 3.0 plus 0.5 is 3.5. Yes, it is, because that's higher than 3.5. And so it's worse than everything else on this sheet. Go up to Warhawk, 4.2 plus 0.5 gives us 4.7. So these few grasses here, these 6 grasses, are all exactly the same statistically. All right, so that's what the LSD does for you. Very, very simple mathematics, but it tells you, is one grass better than another grass? This usually matters more on the top side of this table. So these are the best grasses in the Northeast for our tall fescues. Again, we've got that 0.5. Our highest value here is the 7.1 for regenerate. And if you subtract 0.5 from 7.1, we've got 6.6. So all of the grasses in this pink box here are identical statistically. And so when I'm recommending grasses, I will tell people, choose a grass that's in this top statistical group. This pink box, or whatever, salmon box, whatever color this is the top statistical group. So all of those grasses are great. They're really, really, really good grasses. Not that some of these are bad, but they're not quite as good as that top group. And so if you can find one of these for turf quality wise, and for a lot of other things in NTEP, those are the grasses that you want to select.
So I'm thoroughly confused, Dr. Munshaw.
Okay, good. I did my job.
I thought you picked a bag of grass seed out based upon the price of the bag, not what the in it.
Yeah. So
when someone talks to me about grass seed, they're always asking me, "What's my price? What's my price?" And it's hard for me to explain that if you're buying inferior seed, you may be planting your problem.
So I'll give you a little anecdotal story about exactly that. So you get what you pay for, right? With everything that you buy, you get what you pay for. I was in Southwest Missouri before Christmas. I'm giving an STMA talk in a couple of weeks, and we decided for this talk, it's a Blue Muda talk, which is Bermuda grass and bluegrass together. We're going to make a video rather than giving a talk, because everybody's sick of webinars at this point. And so we're talking to turf managers growing this 2-grass system all over everywhere. And we visited this one guy in Southwest Missouri that he said, you know what? I was told about this idea. I thought it sounded really interesting. I went to my local co-op and I bought a bag of bluegrass seed. And you know what I saw next spring? Annual bluegrass. And he said, you know what I learned from that? You don't just skimp on your front end. You buy the best seed that you can possibly get, because on the other end, you're going to be able to reduce your inputs by not having the issues that you'll have with garbage junky seed. And that seed might have been okay at one point, but a lot of times what you see with inferior seeds, especially from ag co-ops and stuff, is high weed percentages in them. And so that's something you don't want to have to deal with. But this guy went from a whole bunch of annual bluegrass to buying quality seed, which he said was expensive, but he said I'd do it again in a heartbeat. So yeah, price, that's something that I would probably try and shave something off of something else, or think about the future. If you spend a few more bucks, seed is cheap compared to everything else, but if you spend a few more bucks on seed this year, you'll be able to save money on other things down the road if you're buying the right seed. So I know you're being a devil's advocate, but I agree with you.
I agree with you. I will say this: a lot of times when I find cheaper seeds, some of it's weed seed content, but a lot of times they're using cultivars that had their prime back in 1989.
Yeah.
And so they're not using any of the newer, better, more improved varieties.
You're exactly right. So if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot or any one of those big box stores and buy your seed, that's what you're going to find is stuff that was tested, or maybe never tested, but if it was tested, it was tested in the 90s and or early 2000s at best. And things have changed dramatically since that time. And I'll show you some examples of how things have changed just in a couple year period. These grass breeders are so good these days that um, just in one cycle of selection, they're going from okay to really good to fantastic really quickly. And so it's remarkable to watch what's coming out. And it's not just Mountain View. Mountain View's got great grasses, but other companies with their breeders are doing the same thing. And they're selling within too, right? I mean, our breeder sells grasses to other companies and they'll market them as their own. But just these breeders are getting so good at what they're doing. All right, so other things to look at on the NTEP trial. So things that I like, especially I look at density, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. I'll look at seedling vigor and establishment. How quick is it going to come up and get going? To me, that's really important. I want the grass to get going as quick as it possibly can because it's going to reduce your weed populations and it's going to hold soil in place. I'll look at drought. I'll look at, depending on what I'm looking at, if it's Bermuda grass in the transition zone, that's a big deal to me. If I was up north, I would be looking at that for our cool season grasses. Disease is obviously very important. Click on other data, and this is what you find, just random things that may or may not be important to you. But some of that stuff on there is really, really, important information that that you can get a lot of good information about. That disease information, man, I'll tell you what, that's something that I use all the time and something that you should be looking at to choose your cultivars moving forward. That's going to be the difference between, maybe 2 applications a year or 4 applications a year, depending on what variety that you choose. All right, so let's talk about what has changed in technology. On the bottom left here, we've got the 1952 Kentucky basketball squad. And on the top right there, we've got the 2019 Kentucky basketball squad. I'm going to ask you, since you're the only guy I can talk to, what's changed in the 60, 70 years between those two pictures? In just basketball.
In basketball, I think their shorts are a little shorter back then. I don't know. I don't follow basketball. Sorry, wrong guy.
Okay, yeah, I'm not a basketball guy either. I'm hockey all the way, but
and they played games in black and white back then. There was no color.
Okay, so what about height and strength? Do you think that's changed?
Yeah, okay, I guess so.
Okay, what about their shoes? Everybody's wearing Chuck Taylors on 1952, and in 2019 they're whatever crazy Nikes or Adidas or whatever they're wearing. Do you think that technology has changed for those shoes in 70 years?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely, right? Crazy. Can you imagine the game if those guys are still wearing Chuck Taylors today? Would they be able to jump as high as they do? All of that stuff. They'd probably have more injuries and all of that because of the technology changes that have occurred over the 70 years. So big changes. So let me just show you this really quickly. I'm not preaching Mountain View stuff here today, but I want to show you this is the 2012 Tall Fescue trial that ended in 2017. And this is what I want to point out to you, Raptor 3. So the mean scores here, you see Regenerate and Fourth Millennium both had 6.6. Raptor 3, one of Mountain View's Tall Fescues, had a 6.5 at the end of the trial. That's across all the states, across all the years. So 6.5, it was the third best one. The top 2 were tied for first there. Third best on this entire test. You fast forward, this ended in 2017, but these were grasses that were entered, probably bred in 2010 or something, and entered in 2012. You fast forward to the test that's going on now, and you've got ZRC1 experimental as #1, and it's got a score of 6.9. All these PPGs are Mountain View's experimentals that are up here. You have to go all the way down to here to find Raptor 3. Same grass, but this is how much technology has improved all these experimentals in the last 5 years. And so Raptor 3 was considered fantastic in 2012 to 2017, but it's now at a 5.9. The new ones are at a 6.9. And so
I have
go ahead.
2 questions.
Yeah.
My question is, how the heck are we supposed to keep up with this? Is there an easier way? Because I don't know a lot of us who are going to do deep dives into this. And the next question I have for you is, are we going to launch any quizzes?
Oh, yeah, I don't know how to do that, but
You just tell me when it's time to. Can I just launch a quiz?
I'm not at that point where I don't think of the quizzes that are the questions that I've asked. I don't think I've talked about them yet.
Okay, that's fine. Just making sure.
Okay, and I need to talk faster here. I'm going to drag these people all through lunchtime, which I know everybody loves a speaker to do. So really good question there. So I agree with you that my job is to dig through these tables and pull out information that matters, but they're extremely cumbersome to walk through and find good information on. So NTEP realizes that, and actually they're beta testing right now a system that you should be able to just search in whatever you want to search in, whatever grass you want to search in from whatever year, and it will spit out the information that you want to find. So it's being tested. It's not ready for release yet. I'm one of the testers on it, and I can tell you it's better than this, but it probably still has a little bit to go. But it's going to be easier than what I'm doing here and highlighting specific grasses as I go along. But yeah, that's a big issue that I've got with NTEP trials, is the way that the data is presented online to the public. It's something that none of the grass seed companies are too excited about either. All right, but it is what it is. It's like I said, it's the best thing that we've got right now. And so you'll find information on each company's web page about their grasses and how well they did in the NTEP. But again, remember to read through the marketing, and if you need to go back to the source, go back to the source. And if you're ever confused on these things, go to your local university, ask the person doing the rating, and they will explain the differences between them. They'll even walk through the plots with you. I did that a number of times at UK, walking through with people, telling them what this grass was and what that grass was. If that's what you need to do, man, do that.
Yeah, and so I'll cordially invite everyone here to the Rutgers Fine Turf Field Days and Sports Turf Field Days. Happens down at Rutgers University. They walk you through the plots and tell you what, the who, what, where behind them. So it's a great day, and you can get some hands-on learning.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good thing to do. Whenever you can attend those things, you're going to see some of the behind the scenes stuff, but you'll also understand maybe what they're doing, how they're coming up with the information that they're presenting to you. All right. So this is my neighborhood in Kentucky, and so my neighborhood is up on the top left there, and
We're not seeing. Yeah, there we go. Now we can see.
When they built this, this was a horse farm that they just reshaped, and then threw tall fescue seed down over everything just to hold soil in place until they built houses. They then came in and they built these townhouses on the top right there, just to kind of fill up a space that was left over. And look in the foreground here at the tall fescue that was planted. You can see some bare ground and stuff there. It obviously doesn't get a whole lot of love, but it's not the worst. This is not Kentucky 31. This is not the worst tall fescue that you can find. But compare that with the sod that was put down when they built these townhouses. We've got a distinct line of old versus new. And these are managed, you can see the stripes going right across, managed by the same company, nothing different between them, but we've got a huge difference in what they look like. That is the difference between old genetics and new genetics. That grass that they planted there might have been a grass or tall fescue from the 90s. Things have changed that much in the last 20 years. It's remarkable. Like I said, it's remarkable how good these breeders have gotten with what they're doing. All right. So digging deeper and wading through this stuff even more, we've got the NTEP that we talked about there. We've also got TWCA, which is TWACA, and their goal is to find grasses that will have some drought tolerance to them. And then we've got A-list, which was talked about earlier. And the goal with the A-list is to identify grasses that have drought tolerance and then just overall reduced inputs. It's not just about drought, it's about everything. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about how these programs work and how they fit in with NTEP. So NTEP, when we talk about or think about drought, NTEP will include some sites that, or specific trials where they're looking for drought, or they'll have some areas like they'll put sites in Utah where they're not going to get a whole lot of water, or West Texas where they're not going to get a lot of water, just to see how those grasses will do under the conditions of drought. TWCA, which is the Turfgrass Water Conservation Alliance, their thing is they'll send out grasses to different universities, but they're managed normally. They just then will put up a rain shelter like this and dry them down to see how the grasses, how long they'll stay green, basically. So A-list is, let's reduce everything and see which rises to the top, if any. Maybe there's none that do great, but let's see which of these grasses will rise to the top. So low maintenance, the thing about low maintenance is it's not no maintenance. Every grass is still going to need some love and care to keep going, but we want to think about less watering, which is a big deal, less chemicals, less mowing if we can. We don't think about mowing a whole lot, but fossil fuels are a huge deal, and mowers are spitting out a lot of CO2 each year. Less fertilizer is obviously a big deal as well, but it's not no inputs. We're still going to need chemical inputs in these grasses, but if we can use less and grow a thick quality lawn that genetically is going to be pretty and thick, we can get away with using less things, and less things will run off into waterways. That's a big deal. Also, with that thick lawn, it's going to be holding more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere in the root system and depositing in the soil. And so storing that carbon dioxide, cleaning the air, and keeping it in the soil.
So CO2, which is a greenhouse gas, a healthy turf system helps sequester it and take it out of the atmosphere?
Absolutely. So yeah, massively. It's a huge thing. So it's thousands of tons of CO2 a year that a lawn will clean the CO2 out of the air. So grasses all plants need CO2 to photosynthesize. They make their sugars from that. But they're pulling that CO2 out of the air, turning it into sugar, turning it into organic matter, and then they'll live off of that sugar and grow from that sugar in the plant. But it cleans the air, and they spit off clean oxygen that we obviously use, and then we use that oxygen and we breathe out CO2 as a waste product. And so yeah, plants are very important, but they not only clean the air, they deposit that CO2 in the soil, where as long as we're not tilling up the soil, which we don't do in turf, it's stored there in the soil and cleans the air out, and then microbes will eat on that stuff in the soil over time. So all plants are really good at it, but we've got so many acres of turf grasses. It's a really important thing that they do, and something that people, the general public, don't realize. One of those really important things of turf grasses.
Are there any quantitative numbers that are out there right now? I've seen some figures thrown about, but I don't trust them because of the sources.
So USGA did some work on it a number of years ago, and I'd have to dig those numbers up to tell you exactly. But Mike Kenna, who's working with Mountain View now, that was in charge of the USGA for a number of years, he's got those numbers, and I can pull those up and send them to you. I'd be happy to.
I would be very appreciative. Thank you.
Sure. All right, so the A-list, Alliance for Low Input Sustainable Turf. All right, so to get a grass on that has this A-list designation, they've got to go through trials. They have to go through both the NTEP and A-list trials. But still, even if they're entered in A-list, doesn't mean that they're going to end up being an A-list grass. They've got to be in the best, that top group, statistically top group for drought resistance in at least a couple of locations in A-list trials. They have to show both in A-list and NTEP trials good turf quality. They have to score in the top 50% of grasses in NTEP to be able to be considered for A-list. And so these are not just junky grasses that are being considered for A-list. These are the best of the best. And then A-list will choose their locations based on high pressures, high stressful situations. So I had a tall fescue trial in Kentucky because we had high brown patch pressure in Kentucky. And so it was a good place to test these grasses for their disease resistance. And then if you're buying blends or mixes, for them, those blends or mixes to have the A-list designation, they have to have 65% of the cultivars in that bag have to all be A-list certified to call that bag an A-list bag. So these are no joke. These are a lot of testing that's going on over a whole bunch of years for a grass to get A-list. And most of them in the trials don't get it. Most of them fail. And so the ones that are coming through are truly the cream that's rising to the top. All right, so it's not just about drought. Why A-list is better than TWCA? TWCA is okay, but they're just thinking only drought, and their grasses aren't entered in NTEP. And so we really don't know, are they okay grasses? How do they do against everything else across the rest of the country? It's really kind of a smoke and mirrors kind of thing with what you're seeing with TWCA. With A-list, it's all right out there. They'll even send you the raw data if you want to see it. But again, less water, less nitrogen, less pesticides. The pictures that you're seeing there are my site in Kentucky. And the left picture there is a fertilizer trial. I was putting different fertilizer rates on each plot. It was split right down the middle with high or low nitrogen. And the picture on the right there, again, was in Kentucky. This is how dry my plots were in the summertime. I mean, these are truly tested to see will some of these survive or do okay. Again, the A-list trials have to be in NTEP. You want that. You want to see how these grasses are doing across the rest of the country, but how they're holding up. Are they decent? Are they pretty versus whatever else grasses that are out there? And so they have to be superior. So these are the companies that make up A-list. Again, it's an alliance. These companies got together and said, we want to figure out a way to tell people that there's better seed quality out there. And so they created this group called A-list, and it's a nonprofit group. A-list is independently run. These companies are all involved and obviously use their seed for testing and stuff, but this A-list group is completely autonomous and works with universities to figure out the data. These companies have no input on the data whatsoever. And so what you're truly finding is just like NTEP. There's studies that are going on that are unbiased. So from these companies, DLF and Seed Research are the same company. Mountain View, if you didn't see the news yesterday, Mountain View purchased Landmark. And so Landmark and Mountain View are now have the same parent company. And then Lebanon is the only truly by itself company on here. And there may be more over the years, depending on how things go. But A-list has been truly remarkable for all these companies because it's showing off the best of their best products. And this, I'm not going to spend any time on this whatsoever, but this is something if you go on the A-list webpage, and I sent some information yesterday that hopefully will be sent out to you, just some brochures, digital brochures you can look at. But all the grasses that have gone through the A-list trials, these are the ones that have made it through and have done okay. But so here's what I want to show you is if you take those tall fescues, and these are the ones that are recommended from A-list trials, and you look over at the NTEP trials, 9 of the top 24 in that top statistical group are A-list varieties, so 38% of them. So if you look at the number of seed companies involved there, that's only 5 seed companies out of a total of 30 companies that are entered. So 17%. So 17% of the grass companies are coming up with 38% of the top statistical group in NTEP. So these truly are, like I said, these are the best of the best grasses that are being tested across the country. All right. So things to think about when you're selecting improved varieties. Like I said, a lot of times it's perception. That's the big issue that we run into. So when I walk down the street and I see somebody watering the street or the sidewalk, I just shake my head and I think, you know what? Somebody's going to come by here that's not a lawn fan, and they're going to gripe, or they're going to think this is bad, or they're going to post on social media or whatever they do because somebody's watering the sidewalk or the street. Complete waste of water, right? The sidewalk's not going to grow. But that drives me nuts. It's something that can be fixed fairly simply. The picture on the right there is my neighborhood in Kentucky. That this was right across the street from my house, and so I saw this day after day after day. We had a very dry summer, and I noticed the grass on the left there was browning out much worse than the grass on the right there. Neither one of these grasses were irrigated. So I just kept watching this. I thought, this is really interesting. So I'd poke around and see what species are they, and they are both bluegrasses, which is shocking, right? I mean, how does that grass on the right do that well? Because it's an improved variety that deals with drought stress much better than the one on the left. And so that's one of the things that I say, if you want to improve your grasses, if you want to reduce your water use, man, I'll tell you what, looking at new varieties is the thing to do. All right, reduce fertilizer. Again, that picture in the middle there, you could probably put higher fertilizer amounts on that light green area and make it as dark green as the grass on the right. But genetically, that grass on the right has that color built in. You don't have to fertilize it to get a darker green color. On the top here, I've got Kentucky 31 tall fescue and turf types all the way around the outside of it. And obviously, genetically, the turf types have the darker green color. So I was speaking at a field day in Kentucky a number of years ago, and I had a guy, I was talking about these tall fescues, and I had a guy in the audience say, that tall fescue, that Kentucky 31 tall fescue is better than everything else out here. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, it's tougher and whatever. Well, no, it's not, but look at the color of it. And that's an issue, and it grows faster and it's less dense. You can see that the soil down through there, so you can have more weed pressure. He said, yeah, but I can fertilize that more to get the color right. And I thought, this is exactly why we need improved varieties, because we don't need guys like that are just going out there and slinging more and more and more of something to try and make the grass that's not truly adapted or not new with better characteristics better by putting more things on it. That's the wrong mindset that we have, and we've had it for a long time in turf. Mowing, some varieties will grow faster than others. Some species will certainly grow faster than others. This is a tall fescue trial, and I just let it grow up the first year I put it on, or that I planted it, and huge differences in how fast some of these grasses grew. And so, that's something that's important, especially important moving forward. If you're in the mowing business and that's what you do, maybe this isn't as big of a deal to you, but me on my lawn, I don't want to mow all that often. So if I can find one that's growing slower and still dense and recovering, that's the grass that I want. And then the chemical side of this, people see those signs in the middle there, those danger pesticide signs, and people freak out. You're killing my dog, you're killing my kids, all of these things, and they freak out whenever they see these signs that something really bad is going on. Whether it's a really safe chemical or not, it doesn't matter. It's that perception thing. And so if we can choose cultivars like this that don't have the disease pressure like this one has, or this that's not getting the dollar spot that this one's getting, or something that's more dense and keeping out our weeds, we then see these signs less frequently, and that people are not remembering that they have this issue with turf grasses. So that's one of those things that I think is really important, is the chemical side of this. You know, we don't want to be slinging chemicals all the time. Really quickly, this is the NTEP trial from a bunch of years ago, but just differences in Kentucky bluegrass for summer patch. And so when you're looking for your grasses, and again, if these tables, if I didn't help with any of that today, man, I'll tell you, go to your extension specialist in New Jersey or New York or wherever you're at, and ask them, which is the best grass for me for summer patch tolerance? And they'll tell you. And they're not paid by some company to tell you. They're just going to tell you what's the best, what's done best in your area. And so look for those things.
They will say buy Cinetech seed. That's what they'll say.
Usually they'll just make it blanket and say Mountain View, but since you sell Mountain View, you know, that covers it. I kid. Again, I'm not selling Mountain View. There are other grasses out there that are fantastic. All right. So the best weed control is, answer this one for me. What is the best form of weed control?
Thick, dense lawn.
Absolutely. Thick as you can possibly get it. So if you've got it that thick, how in the world can a weed start and get going with grass that's that thick? And so all of these things that we do to them week in and week out are important. But the first one that you see there, turf selection, is critical. Choosing the right grass, choosing improved cultivars. And then everything else that we do, it also will dictate how these grasses will perform. And I've got herbicides on there, but I think herbicides should be down that list, because, you know, we should be thinking about all these things first. We are turf managers. We are not weed managers. All right. So this image real quick, we've got, this is Bermuda grass that had disease on it. You can see the light green is crabgrass, which is going crazy where there's no competition. And we've only got a little bit of crabgrass where the Bermuda grass is doing okay. And so you take away that competition, the weeds blow up. And so you want to keep your grass as thick as you possibly can to keep the weeds at bay. So again, thick, healthy turf is the best thing you can do. The thing that I look at for this is the density ratings from NTEP. You can go on here and find out which grasses are the thickest genetically, and choose the grasses that are going to be thicker than others to keep weeds at bay. Again, things that you can use from NTEP trials to help move forward. So if you're doing all of these things, if you're reducing all your inputs, obviously you're going to be saving some money. And so whatever upfront costs you might have buying quality seed, you're going to get that money back on the back end. And a lot of times, you folks in the lawn care industry, you're just stuck managing whatever that's on the grass that the homeowner has. But if you're moving forward and you can actually spec the grasses moving forward, this is something to think about and to sell to the homeowners, that they're going to have better grasses with less inputs. And you can still make trips to that lawn to do different things. I'm not saying stop all your inputs. You just have to do things differently. All right, really quickly here, I've only got a few minutes left. I want to talk about grasses up in your area of the world. You've got transition zone flowing right up through New Jersey, into New York, into Connecticut, Rhode Island. And so your climate is basically the same as my climate down here. Your hot summers, your cold winters. Once you get into Western New York and places like that, that's a whole different animal. But along the coast, it's very much similar to what I've got. But regardless, you're still growing a lot of the same grasses that I'm growing here. So tall fescue, I agree completely that this is the grass. You know, these have gotten better and better and better over the years. And you know, I used to really worry about cold tolerance in the northern locations, but even in Minneapolis, they're growing more and more tall fescue all the time. Again, because they've got cold tolerance that's coming up through breeding, and they're finding out that it's worth it. You know, even if we get a little bit of winter kill every once in a while in some low areas or whatever, it's worth it because the amount of maintenance through the rest of the year is so much lower than Kentucky bluegrass that it totally makes sense. So really quickly, things I like about it, you know, here's the thing with tall fescues. Every one of them can produce rhizomes. That's something that they don't necessarily always tell you, but that's one of the things that tall fescues can do, make really, really short rhizomes, especially if there's a thin area. One of the things I really like about tall fescues is that they'll grow in any kind of soil conditions. They don't care. They just want to grow. It's not a princess grass in the slightest. Drought avoidance, it has deep roots, and so whenever it senses drought, it sends down deeper roots to keep the grass going. Cold tolerance, we talked about that, is getting better and better. Shade tolerance is pretty decent. One of the reasons I like it for golf course roughs and lawns, but you can see the places that we use this grass, a lot of different locations in the north and transition zone.
So quick question for you.
Yeah.
We now know that the new cultivars do spread. The question I have for you is, do tall fescues naturally contain endophytes?
Some do. So an endophyte is a fungus that lives in the seed and moves into the plant. And you'll read that you can have an endophyte enhanced plant, and which will give you some stress tolerance and insect resistance and some things like that, drought tolerance. It's a really good thing in turf, not good for forages or pastures. But if the seed is old, the endophyte can die, and so you want to get fresh seed especially if you're dealing with endophytes. But endophytes are a really good thing, and there's novel endophytes now that are doing more and more things. And yeah, if you can find endophyte enhanced seed, usually means better stress tolerance, fewer inputs. Good question. The spreading tall fescues, yes, they're out there. Again, pay attention to the marketing. The one on the left there is one of the Mountain View ones. I didn't take this picture. I don't know, is there really that big of rhizomes that are coming out of this tall fescue clump? Maybe there is, maybe there is. Again, I didn't take that picture, but look at, this is turf height. This is I pulled off a competitor's site, not one of the ones that you sell at Cinetech, but look how tall they're mowing this. This is pasture or taller height. So think about things like that when you're looking at marketing. This is not apples to apples. You've got some big old rhizomes coming out here, but you've got a huge plant here. This drawing is from AJ Turgeon from Penn State, his textbook, Turf Grass Management. And look at what happens when you grow at low heights. You've got less rhizome production. When you grow it up tall, you've got much more rhizomes. And so they're doing a little bit of trickery. It's not lying, but it's a little bit of marketing trickery. And so again, wade through the marketing. Don't just buy into that stuff. Blanket statements. All right, Kentucky bluegrass. I like some things about it. I love the color and density and texture and all those things. But it likes only specific soils. It doesn't like to grow in poor soils. It doesn't have shade tolerance. Likes the winter, it has no problems. Again, in Western Canada, where I grew up, this is the only grass that we had because nothing else would survive. Heat tolerance is so. Good rhizomes. This is one I pulled out of my lawn in Kentucky. It was about 1.5 feet long. Slow establishment's an issue. Thatching's an issue. Insect and disease problems are issues. And so there's goods and bads with this grass, but overall, it takes more inputs than tall fescue. And here's the other thing: through breeding, through genetics, improved genetics, here's what we've got with our tall fescues and Kentucky bluegrass. So we always used to think about Kentucky bluegrass was so much better of a lawn than tall fescue. So this is Kentucky bluegrass on the left. These are different tall fescues on the right. And you've got some of these tall fescues that are now about the same density and texture and color of Kentucky bluegrass. And so if that was ever a concern with years before, it's something to move away from, because these tall fescues, man, they're something else. So things I like about turf type tall fescues over Kentucky bluegrass: better heat tolerance, better drought tolerance, better disease tolerance, better shade tolerance, equals less maintenance overall. And so we've got that environmental benefit, which is huge. Perennial ryegrass, we'll just skip over that real quickly. I love it and hate it at the same time. Germinates quick, but it's so full of disease and issues with heat and cold tolerance that I just can't recommend a whole lot of perennial ryegrass, other than having a little bit in a mix to get a grass up coming up quickly at the front end. Spreading perennial ryegrasses are out there, but again, wade through the information. Look for university data. This is one that I did before I ever joined Mountain View. And so there are differences. This was a good one, but there was other ones that were really good too. But there were other well-marketed grasses that did horribly for spreading perennial ryegrasses. And spreading perennial ryegrasses aren't a big, thick rhizome or stolon. They're just really aggressive tillerers. Differences in establishment between the three grasses. Mike, do you need to ask those questions?
Yeah, I got to ask him sometime.
Okay, well, go ahead. We've only got a minute left, and
Let's hit a quick launch here, guys. We're going to do a quiz. Answer it as fast as you possibly can. What is the most common grass species variety grown in the Northeast? And I'm asking, what are you growing? What is the varieties that you are growing?
I guess we did too much chatting. I got a little bit behind here.
No, I don't ever think it's too much chatting. If it's important stuff to get out, I apologize. If we go a little over, I don't think anyone's going to complain. And so we're going to close the quiz. 25% of the folks are growing, 26% Kentucky bluegrass, 59% tall fescue, and 15% are growing perennial ryegrass. So if you looked at that number years ago, that number would have been way different. It used to be bluegrass and ryegrass were tied, and then it became ryegrass, and no one grew tall fescue, and now tall fescue is really starting to take off in the Northeast.
Which is great. That's exactly what you need to be doing. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
You want to run some more?
Nah, that's good enough.
Okay. So I want to finish with this then. So I've talked about all this new technology and stuff, but you remember this from a few years ago, Zion Williamson, when he blew out of his fancy Nike shoes there at Duke University, just a beast of a guy. When you put some things under such massive stress and strain, sometimes they will fail. And so I just want to just leave you with that, yeah, we've come a long way, but it doesn't mean that things are always going to be perfect for you, because sometimes we'll just run into environmental conditions that are so harsh that the grass can't keep up with them. And so, but yeah, think about those things with the improvements that these A-list grasses have provided. They're pretty incredible. The improvements that we've seen. Choose your grasses based on what works for your location, what has been tested in your area, and make sure you're using your discernment when you're looking at ads. Don't just believe everything that you read. And I'll leave you with that. I apologize, I'm 2 minutes over here, but
don't apologize. We really appreciate it. It was a lot of great information. Again, guys, email out your information. That's kind of important. We do have some handouts that we're going to be sending you that we were sent. So we will be sending you out this A-list if it loads up on my computer. All the A-list information, which is great. Approved varieties, where you're going to find a ton of Mountain View seeds listed on it. And by the way, you can buy the Mountain View seeds, the A-list varieties, in two of our products. It's called Branch Creek Evolution Seed, and also another product, Stadium Elite Pro. And so we carry two varieties that, if you want to do a no-brainer and pick 2 bags of seed that you're going to win with every time, it's going to be Evolution and another variety called Stadium Elite